All right, here we go. Hello, welcome everybody. My name is Bonnie Storak. I am the Senior Outreach Coordinator for Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake. Welcome to our potential grant application webinar. We'll be going over 2 different grant opportunities here tonight. One is through the Chesapeake Bay Trust, and one is through the Department of Natural Resources.
Bonnie, can you pause for a second? I think Desiree, could you put yourself on mute? It looks like there's, thank you.
Yes, I was just about to say, if you can mute yourselves while we're doing the presentation, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers live once we get through the presentations. So I'm going to start and introduce our partners in this project. So raise your hand for a second, and then we'll have you each do an introduction. So Brianna Brooks is with the Chesapeake Bay Trust, and she's going to be one of our presenters tonight. And Nicole Carlozzo is with the Department of Natural Resources, from Maryland Department of Natural Resources. And Ashley Trout is with Guyacine Services. So I'm going to turn it over to each one of them to just do a brief description of what their part in this project is. And then Brianna, if it's okay with you, we're going to start with CBT's presentation, and you'll be able to share your slides. And then we'll go to Nicole and then to Ashley. All right.
Great. Yes,
So,
I will kick off introductions, but I would love to ask Nicole if you can go first. You can kind of support me in that, and then I'll hop in.
That's
been a
fine.
crazy day. Cool.
Yep,
So
that's
my
fine.
name is Brianna Brooks. I am a program officer at the Chesapeake Bay Trust, and I support the connector group side of the capacity, the community-based organization capacity building initiative. It's quite a mouthful. We call it CBO/CBI. And Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake is what we call a connector group, kind of an organization that's connected with groups of, of faith that where we can also make this connection between natural resources. And then my colleague Emily, she will be leading the technical assistance provider side of things. And she is currently out on vacation, so I will hop in with watershed assistance questions.
Great. Thanks. How about we go to Ashley, and then Nicole, you can just kick right in from there. All right, Ashley, go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ashley Trout. I'm with Guyacine Services, and I will be leading the technical assistance team. So after you guys make your way through the great fun adventures with Interfaith Partners at the Chesapeake, they're going to send you all over to my team, which consists of myself and 2 engineering firms. And then we'll be working with you to get your grant proposals ready and submitted. And I'll go into a good deal more detail on that in a few minutes.
Great. And now Nicole.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole Carlozzo. I'm a natural resource planner with Maryland Department of Natural Resources, and I manage one of the grant programs that we're going to be sharing with you tonight called the Resiliency Through Restoration Initiative. Bonnie, did you want me to just share my screen and get started?
Yeah, I think it's easier that way. I'm just here to back you up in case, Wi-Fi issues.
Right, right. So can you see my screen?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, great. So I'm going to be talking a little bit tonight about the Resiliency Through Restoration Initiative, which is a relatively new grant program at the department. And this program was launched in 2017 with the goal of helping communities to be more resilient to the impacts of climate change. And this is through the implementation of nature-based practices. So we can fund practices like leveeing shorelines, wetland restoration, dune restoration, and forest buffers. And since its launch, we've actually also expanded the program to not only focus on coastal impacts, but also to focus on impacts from rain events. So we can work with inland and more urban communities that are dealing with flooding due to stormwater impacts. So kind of the main difference between this funding source and the other one you'll hear about tonight is that this funding source focuses more on the impacts of water quantity, the amount of water, and the impacts of that water on communities and community infrastructure and community assets. And these are some cute photos that I can go back to talk about if we have time later. So just really briefly, some of the long-term goals of this grant program. We're working to reduce Maryland's vulnerabilities to climate change. And this is through working with communities to better understand their risk to climate change impacts, to plan, to address that risk, and then also to implement solutions for addressing that risk. And where the resiliency program comes in is through that implementation phase. We're working with local partners to design and implement nature-based or green infrastructure practices. The second goal is to improve understanding of community benefits. And this we're doing this through working with our in-house staff as well as academic partners on monitoring of these practices. And we're also working with community members to do some photo monitoring of these practices pre and post storm events if they're able to safely do so. And really through just implementation and monitoring. We're working to elevate the use of and understanding of where nature-based practices are feasible and practical, because we know that these practices may not be, we may not be able to implement them everywhere, but we want to better understand where they're going to be the most successful for dealing with different types of climate change impacts. And then we're working to demonstrate and encourage public-private partnerships. So right now, that's mainly through bringing together local, state, and federal funding resources to support these projects so that we can really accelerate how many projects we're able to get on the ground. And this is just a photo or an image from one of our monitoring efforts where we're monitoring wave energy along a shoreline. So this just kind of shows the waves coming in and the different sensors. And as part of this effort, we'll be collecting this type of data to better understand how nature can play a role in reducing risk, and then we'll be distributing it and doing education and outreach once that project is complete. So like I mentioned, this funding source can fund design, implementation, and adaptive management of nature-based or green infrastructure practices. And over the short term, we're really working to demonstrate how these types of nature-based features and practices can help enhance community resilience to the impacts of climate change. And we're doing this through the implementation of pilot projects across the state. So right now we have a target of implementing 15 projects. We're currently working on 19 projects, and we have 3 more that are coming, that'll be coming online later on this fall. So a total of 22. This is a very new program. We're not going to have as many projects implemented as some of the other funding sources, but we're still really excited about reaching our target. And these projects are in different phases of design, permitting, and construction. And right now, what we're doing on an annual basis is that we're soliciting proposals for projects. And right now, the proposal timeframe or the solicitation is open, and it will be open through December 15th. So how does DNR select projects? This is, like I mentioned, through our solicitation. It's called the Grants Gateway. I have an image here of the solicitation title sheet. And for the resiliency funding, we're focusing on outcome 3. So this solicitation has 5 different outcomes for different funding sources at the department, but outcome 3 is where we're working to solicit project ideas for utilizing natural and nature-based infrastructure to enhance resilience of communities to climate change. And this outcome 3 is open to local governments and to nonprofits. We work with nonprofits and not-for-profits. The only requirement is that nonprofits provide a letter of support from a local government entity. And then also nonprofits must be registered in compliance and in good standing with the Maryland Secretary of State. The one caveat there is that churches are exempt from that requirement. So I definitely wanted to make that known. And if there are other nonprofits that are interested that you're unsure about your registration status, just contact me and I'm happy to check on it for you. Applicants can apply for design, construction, or design build for nature-based projects like living shorelines and wetland restoration and dune restoration, but we also can fund stormwater-focused projects such as rain gardens, bioretention facilities, or bioswales. And we're focusing this effort on Maryland communities that are impacted by coastal or stormwater flooding. So like I mentioned, it's a focus on water quantity. And we do have a few online mapping resources and tools that we use to screen proposals. And I'll talk about that on the next slide. But wanted to mention that we are not only focused on the coast at this time, we are expanding to also look inland and to our more urban areas. Yeah, the only other thing I wanted to mention on this slide is that for design funding, we can support projects up to $100,000. It's really ranged depending on the project scale from as low as $30,000 to as high as $100,000. We don't have a cap for construction at this time. It really will just depend on the scale of the site and the project itself. So I mentioned that we use some online data resources and tools for screening projects. So this is an example of one of those tools. This is Maryland's Coastal Resiliency Assessment. It's available right here at this URL. It's called Maryland's Coastal Atlas. And this tool helps us to identify vulnerable areas based on a couple different metrics, such as flood risk, population density, or social vulnerability. But it also looks at where natural features like forests and wetlands occur along the shoreline, where we think that those features can do a pretty good job of reducing risk. And this is reducing risk to inundation from coastal flooding events, but also reducing risk to erosion. You could find on the Coastal Atlas, there are also other data layers. If anyone's interested and if anyone has questions, you can feel free to contact me and I can walk you through it. But there's information there on historic shoreline, rates of change, floodplain data, and other data sets on sea level rise and et cetera to help kind of tell the story of your community. And although we use this tool as a screening tool for our proposals, I did want to mention that this tool is only used for coastal projects. It does not include riverine areas or upland or inland areas in the scale or scope of this project. And so for projects that don't occur along the coastline, we also make sure to take a close look at any documentation that our applicants provide about impacts at the site or at the community level. That it's really important for us to see that documentation since we don't have tools at the moment to evaluate those sites from a statewide perspective. So I wanted to just show one slide here of the review criteria. Every year we do try to select projects that represent a range of project types, a range of geographies, and a range of communities. And we select projects based on many different factors, which are listed here. This includes, or the most important one is at the top here, coastal exposure reduction for community infrastructure or community assets. And so we're really looking for projects that play a role in providing a buffer for coastal community infrastructure, or that allow stormwater to infiltrate and to be stored and to reduce risk of stormwater flooding. We look at ecological enhancement. So is the practice designed to provide as much habitat to the greatest extent that's practical or possible? We also look at cost efficiency. We do look for up to a 1-to-1 match, but that is not required. We do not have a match requirement for this grant, but we may look for, are there community volunteers that are going to be participating or maintaining the project? We may look for if local materials are being integrated into the project to reduce costs. Those are just a few examples. And for some projects that may not have a direct coastal exposure reduction benefit, two factors that we look very closely at are demonstration value and innovation. So if the project is demonstrating a newer practice, something new that's innovative and new and exciting that hasn't been documented in your region before, or if it has high levels of access to for the community members to come and see the project, then those are things that we will consider. But we try to select projects that provide community-wide benefits, that they're not just benefiting one individual property owner, and that where there is access for a greater number of people. We're also looking for proposals that that showcase that the project is ready to go and ready to move forward, which through this effort that you're going to be learning about tonight and these partners, I think that that's going to greatly increase the readiness and ability to proceed factor for these projects. But we'll be looking for if all the partners are identified in your proposal, if their roles are identified, if all of the appropriate agreements or access agreements or landowner agreements are in place, and really that the partners are on board, that there's a community letter of support and that it's ready to go. One last thing I wanted to mention is that we do require for these proposals that the designer incorporates or considers climate change data within the project design. So this could mean looking at sea level rise projections, and we have a link in the solicitation for that, or looking at local trends and projections for more intense and more frequent rain events. And so we want these projects to be forward thinking and not be based on historic metrics to the greatest extent practical. And sometimes there are constraints there with, especially for some of our smaller practices that may have size constraints and things like that. But that's something that we do want considered and documented through the design process. All right, so I just have 2 slides left. I wanted to showcase 2 examples of projects that are either recently been completed or that are up and coming. So this slide is a project in Anne Arundel County at the West River Methodist Center. And it's for this project, we partnered with the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay and the West River Methodist Center. And this project shows a couple of different practices. So this site is used as a church camp, and they're having issues with their bulkhead that was deteriorating, and they wanted to replace it with something more natural. And so they implemented here a living shoreline. So this photo is from construction. So the site has not been planted yet, but in this photo, but imagine these little curved points here. These are headland breakwaters. They break the waves as they come in. Imagine all of this planted up, all of this sand area planted up to reduce erosion and to address wave energy. And then to the left of that on the far side of the photo going down the shoreline, this is a cobble beach living shoreline. So the site demonstrates 2 different types of living shoreline practices. We also worked with them to address stormwater on site. So there were 2 pipes that were coming in and emptying stormwater straight into the West River. And back here where this construction equipment is here on the left, and then on the right back here where my cursor is, near this other construction equipment, they implemented wetland complexes called regenerative stormwater conveyance systems. But basically what these systems do is they trap stormwater and they allow it to slowly move through the complex, allow it to filter the water to remove nutrients, and then it moves down to the West River. So this project was very exciting because it incorporated both shoreline and a stormwater component. And so we're focused on water quantity, trapping that stormwater to prevent any impacts on site, but it also has that co-benefit of providing those water quality benefits. And then at this site also, because there's a church camp, there's a huge potential here for education and outreach. The second site I wanted to show is a more urban area. This is a project that we're working on with the Low Impact Development Center, a nonprofit. And they're working with the city of Hyattsville to design a submerged gravel wetland stormwater practice. So this site, well, let me show you here. The photos up here are just some photos of flooding in buildings in the same road as the project. So it's not directly on site, but you can see there's a lot of stormwater during these flashy rain events on site and along within this watershed. And so this is a demonstration site not only for the city, but also for the state, because the state had previously funded Low Impact Development Center and the city to develop a stormwater planning study to be a little bit more forward thinking and provide some estimates for rainfall based on climate change projections, and then to use those estimates to determine potential locations for best management practices within the lower Ward 1 here. So this was one of the sites that was identified in that planning study. So this demonstrates moving from planning to implementation. And then the city is using this site as a demonstration project because they want to implement many more of these best management practices to address water quantity and water quality. And to address water quantity, they really are going to have to upscale and accelerate the number of these practices that they want to implement. So they're using this as a communication tool. This is one of the city-owned properties here. So this is currently in the design phase, but this project was successful because the partners really told the story of how this one demonstration project would really help accelerate their implementation of these types of practices moving forward. And that's everything that I had. This is my contact information. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions. I also have the link here for our Grants Gateway solicitation, and then the link to our website for the Resiliency Through Restoration funding.
Great. Thanks so much, Nicole. And I'll just answer this question because I know it's in everyone's mind. We will be sharing the recording of tonight's presentation. So I should have told you that before. You don't have to frantically take notes. You will be able to watch the, and I think I can share the slides as well as a separate PDF. So you don't have to frantically take notes tonight. Okay, great. Thanks so much, Nicole. So now, Brianna, there you are. Okay, so we'll let Brianna take it over now. Thanks.
So Brianna's going to share her slides and I'm going to do the presentation, Bonnie. So I'm going to introduce myself really quickly. Brianna, you already introduced yourself, right?
Right.
So hi, everyone. My name is Casey Wetzel, and I'm the Director of Outreach and Education at the Chesapeake Bay Trust. And I have the pleasure of working with Nicole at DNR. And then on my team, Brianna and Emily. Emily is not here tonight, but Emily is, because she's on vacation, just to be clear, everything's okay. But she leads our Watershed Assistance Grant Program on our team, and would have loved to have been here. So she sends her apologies. So I'm going to give her presentation for her, and then Brianna's going to come in at the end and give a little bit more information about some of our processes. So sorry if this doesn't feel as smooth as Nicole's presentation, but we're doing our best without Emily here. So Brianna's going to click through the slides and I'll talk through it a little bit. So the first thing I just wanted to do is explain who the Chesapeake Bay Trust is. So hopefully I can't, now that we're sharing slides, of course I can't see everybody, but has everyone seen the license plate on cars? It's kind of an aqua color. All right, I see a bunch of shaking heads. Great. So the Chesapeake Bay Trust is an organization that receives funding through the Motor Vehicle Administration. And that funding comes to the trust in part, not in full, and we regrant it to the public to do projects like the ones that Nicole was just talking about and some of the projects we're about to talk about next. So the trust receives also donations, and we kind of function like a community foundation where we pool resources from different funding partners to maximize impact. And the Watershed Assistance Grant Program is an example of that. So we work very closely with the Maryland Department of Natural Resources and the Maryland Department of the Environment, and we pool their funding along with ours to offer more funding in the Watershed Assistance Grant Program. So it's a partnership grant program. So that's why you see a few logos on the first slide. So we'll happen to the, oh yeah, now back to the slides. Thanks, Bree. Great, so that's who the trust is. So when you see the license plate, please know it does something good. It's not a vanity plate. It's getting kids outside to learn about our environment. It's putting projects in the ground, and it's supporting the good work that folks like y'all do on this call. So among many other things. Okay, so the goals of the Watershed Assistance Grant Program Thanks, Bree, are to improve water quality and resiliency in local streams and rivers in the Bay. We're, like we said, it's a partnership between the Trust, DNR, and the Maryland Department of the Environment. And our goals are to fund the earliest phases of watershed restoration work. So the Trust has implementation programs, meaning that we offer grant programs to actually put projects in the ground, construct greening projects. And so does DNR. They have a number of different projects, like grant programs in their portfolio that fund implementation work. But we heard through a bunch of listening sessions years and years ago that there really was a need to phase this work and to provide funding that was dedicated specifically for planning and design, right? So the earliest phases, when we say the earliest phases of watershed restoration projects, we mean planning and design. So giving people a year or so, sometimes up to 2 years, to actually just plan out what they want to do, working with a planner or working with an engineer in this case, and thinking through what are your design options, applying for funding to actually see a design project through. So we have a few tracks in this program. We just increased this slightly. So it used to be $75 for stormwater. It's now up to $100,000 for design of stormwater BMPs, up to $150 for stream restoration design, and up to $75,000 for planning, which is consistent with previous years. But we increased it slightly for design of BMPs. So our upcoming deadline for the Watershed Assistance Grant Program is December 2nd at 4 p.m. So we have a little bit of time between now and then, which is good. It gives you time to think through project ideas with the support of the connector group, as well as your technical assistance providers here. So we'll go to the next slide. So this is a list of who is eligible. I'm not going to read you this list, but you can quickly scan it. If anyone on this call doesn't fall into one of these buckets, we're happy to talk to you about options to still be able to apply. Just because you're not on this list doesn't mean that you can't potentially be an applicant through a fiscal agent of some sort. So there's usually lots of opportunity to apply regardless of your organization status. But this is a non-comprehensive list of folks that are eligible. Next slide. Great. So we're just going to talk in a little bit more detail about the project design track. So like I said, up to $100,000 for stormwater design, or up to $150 for stream restoration design. The track provides an opportunity to create buildable designs. So we're not looking to fund designs that might sit on a shelf for years and not get constructed. We really want something that is going to be permittable, we should say, which is why we've structured this to have technical assistance in the mix, so that you all can have that technical support and ensure that the design that you get is something that can be permitted, which can be, that's a hard thing to navigate sometimes. So having that assistance is really useful. So a few examples of the types of projects we're talking about something called bioretention cells. So bioretention cells are essentially just ways to slow the flow of stormwater, sink it back through the ground naturally, clean it naturally. There's something called microbioretention as well. Large scale rain gardens. Rain gardens are exactly what they sound like. Obviously, they collect rainwater in them and again, sink the water back through the ground naturally, so that we're cleaning our rainwater and putting it back into the ground, slowing the flow of stormwater runoff. And then obviously other low impact development stormwater techniques like stream restoration, which can be is a pretty contentious type of design project right now, but in some places stream restoration works, and we have the science to prove that it works. In some places the jury's still out on that, which we totally admit, but we're supporting the science behind stream restoration, and we are continuing to support stream restoration in places where we have good science that it works, and looking very critically at stream restoration in areas where there may be trade-offs to putting in a stream restoration project, for instance. So we follow the science on that. In case anyone is, wants to learn more about that, we're happy to connect you with some of our other folks on our restoration team. Wetland and marsh creation are another example of projects we support for design. And then obviously also we do some ag work too. I suspect a lot of you aren't looking to do ag work, but if that was the case, we'd certainly be interested in that too. So again, not a comprehensive list. Those are just examples of types of projects that we've supported. And you can see some photos of those examples along the bottom. We're happy to share with you more examples of projects if you're interested in the types of designs that we usually support. So we can go to the next slide. Bree, do you want me to? I don't think I can advance this slide. Did we lose you?
We're seeing the newest one on our end, Casey.
Oh, okay, good. I'm not. So, oh yes, and agriculture. Thank you, Bonnie. I appreciate that.
Say,
If I use any shorthand or acronyms, please say something. Like me, I'm definitely going to try to keep that in mind. Thank you. All right, great. So, Watershed.
Hold on. We're still on the last slide you're on.
so it
Bree,
has
can
the same photos as the previous slide, but it's a
Okay.
different
Okay.
slide.
All right. The words are different.
Yes.
Okay. Well, maybe that's what happened, Bree.
I think it was just, yeah, it's the photos.
Right on. Okay, so attention to detail. Clearly, Ashley was the only one actually reading the words. Just over here rattling on. Okay, so what makes a strong design proposal? So, we're looking for requests that can, we'll fund up to 100% design. So we're looking to support designs and we'll prioritize designs for projects that focus on water quality improvement. So there's a lot of folks that are dealing with water quantity issues, and we're interested in that too, but are prioritizing projects that will also improve water quality, right? So we know that some of the drivers for folks are that they have water quantity issues, but the dollars that are in this pot obviously have goals around them of improving water quality. So, strong design proposals will also be cost effective. We do share within our RFP the average costs of different types of projects so that you can get a sense of what those average costs are. I won't walk through those now, but it's something that that obviously our, connector group, as well as our technical assistance providers can help with. Request for proposal. RFP, thank you so much, Bonnie. So an RFP stands for request for proposals, and that just is our application package, honestly. Everything that you would need to know, and again, there's lots of support here to help you. We're available to you. The technical assistance providers are available to you. And obviously Bonnie is an excellent translator of the lingo. It's an application package. It's what you're going to have. It walks you through how to apply. The application process is an online system. So it also walks you through what you're going to be expected to provide and what your technical assistance provider will be supporting you with in getting the application completed and in. Okay, so thanks for that, Bonnie. I appreciate that. Okay, back to, what a strong design proposal would include. Not only should it be cost effective, meaning it's looking at those average costs in the request for proposal RFP, but it would include a conceptual sketch. So photos of the restoration site would be included. So that means the location where you'd like to do the project, a map of the drainage area. And again, these are things that I know are relatively new to folks on the call, but that's why Ashley's team is here to help. And we recognize that that's something that, despite our best efforts to, educate and train folks through our application packages, sometimes additional help is needed, right? So obviously the application packages also include letters of commitment from the landowners. So this may not come as a surprise to anyone, but we have had a few instances in the past where folks apply to do things on land that is not their own, maybe their HOA's land, or something of that nature. And unfortunately, not everyone was on board, and it causes big headaches for everyone involved. So we do now require that there's letters of commitment from whoever owns the land, just to be sure that everyone's aware and on board, so there's no frustration down the line. And includes a scope of work and cost estimates. So basically, we're looking for okay. My goodness, I use a ton of acronyms. HOA is Homeowners Association. Thank you. And then, okay, so the last thing here is just that a scope of work is basically what it's going to take to do this work, and estimates from contractors as well. And so if you're going to be hiring someone to do the design work, to actually finish the design, we want to see that you either have gotten cost estimates or intend to get cost estimates. There are federal dollars that support this program that flow through Maryland Department of the Environment and Maryland Department of Natural Resources, DNR and MDE. And a lot of requirements come with federal dollars. And so federal dollars require that each applicant get at least 3 estimates if they're going to contract help for the design. And almost everyone that's applying to this is not an engineer, so they're looking to contract a designer that will help them with the work. And that's wonderful. We just need to be sure that you're in compliance with the federal government's requirements, which means that you need to get at least 3 estimates, right? And that the hope there is just that you're getting a good deal, right? That's kind of the gist of it. Okay.
Casey, can you clarify if an organization, if the faith-based entity is applying themselves, do they have to supply that commitment from the landowner, or since they're the applicant, are they good to go?
If they own the land, then
Right.
they can say that they own the land, and that would be more than sufficient. That's a good point. But if they don't, if they're proposing to do work on, like, they're renting a property, right? They don't own the property, then yes, you would need to get a letter of commitment from the basically your landlord, the owner of that property.
Great, thank you.
That's an example. Yeah. Okay. Grant program tracks. So this is another track, which is our watershed planning and program development track. So we offer up to $75,000 for planning work. The track provides funding for specific projects to be identified in a particular area. So we've done this at the watershed scale and at the community scale. We typically don't do smaller than like a community scale. For instance, unless somebody's plot of land was very large acreage, we typically don't do planning at very small scales, because we're looking to produce plans that would cover big swaths of land for prioritizing, not only developing concepts for how they would manage stormwater on that land, but then prioritizing those projects long-term for design, right? So this is actually the earliest phase you could apply for. Planning then informs design requests that then inform requests to actually put the projects in the ground. And so example projects address, concept plans for a particular area. If you're looking to do program development, there's projects that address policy development or enhancement. What that means and what that's usually looked like, this is probably less relevant for this group, is local governments have applied to this program to actually create policies at the local level that will enhance their work. And that means doing some types of research in the past. Organizational enhancement. So for instance, we had Anne Arundel County come in and say they were going to, build a program out to better track their septic systems, and where they might be, where those septic systems exist and might be able to be better managed. So that's a different kind of planning work that we've supported. Watershed planning assessment phase. So I just talked to you a lot about that, meaning that you're planning for what types of projects might be prioritized in a given area of land. An action phase, meaning what projects would actually be prioritized to be put in the ground first. And then also financing strategies. We have supported 2 or 3 financing plans in the past that would develop ways in which you could prioritize funding support to actually get projects in the ground. Those are less common. What we mostly receive in watershed planning is, bringing on a group like a Gaia scene, like we have here, to actually help with planning for conceptually what type of projects should go in here and what should be prioritized in the future. So that's what the watershed planning and program development track is about. Great. So the strongest planning proposals will demonstrate how the project will set the local jurisdiction up for success. So again, this is largely, when it comes to program development, this has largely been applied for from local jurisdictions, not individual landowners, but the planning work like individual planning work for landowner, like a given swath of land, a community level or a watershed level, has been applied for by individual nonprofits. It will demonstrate if limitations to a previously amassed set of information exist. So in some cases, if you were looking to do watershed planning, you may already live in an area where a watershed plan exists, but it's very out of date. So if you wanted to do planning work at your community scale, which would be very cool, you might want to look first, and we could help you with this, to identify whether or not you're already in a watershed plan area. And if that watershed plan is out of date, did not actually identify real projects, just lists of things that could be done rather than locations for projects, which would be a good argument for doing a deeper dive plan, like sort of sub plan, as an example. And then obviously it would need to include a map of the watershed that you're in and include detailed information of how your information would be gathered to inform your plan. So again, what that just means is, will your process for planning be inclusive? Will it be engaging of the folks that live and work in that area? We've seen watershed plans that were frankly designed without engaging the community, which is not a best practice. You want to run an inclusive planning process to ensure that there's buy-in. So when you eventually do design and implement projects in a plan, that there is support for that work. Okay. So what are eligible budget items? So staff time to support project-related tasks is absolutely a good budget item. And your time is valuable. You would be spending time managing the contractor and managing the project, and you should include time, costs for your time to do that. I think the most common line item we see are costs for contractual services to actually create designs or plans. Because as we know, most of the folks that are applying are not designers or planners. So they're looking to gain resources to actually contract out those services. We frequently see costs included for permitting the project. And then other costs associated with design planning upon justification. So we're open to what that might be, what that might mean. And so we've seen that take the shape, for instance, of doing an investigation of where there might be underground power lines that it's not evident if they're there, or if there's some sort of legacy issue there, right? That might need to be identified. And so some additional research is needed, or, preliminary investigations are needed, right? To ensure that the concept plan, the way it is viable. And then indirect costs, which are not to exceed 10% of the sum of the direct costs. And what that means, indirect costs, we have a guidance document on our website about what indirect costs are. So I'd encourage you all to read that, but basically it just means, usually, this is a loose interpretation of just what you need to keep the lights on, do the work, right? So, and that's, so if your total costs were, X, you would take 10% of what that is and back that out. And that could be the maximum of what your indirect costs could be. And we don't need to know what you'll spend your indirect costs on. They're just indirect costs. Sometimes we see people get real detailed about indirect costs. That's not necessary. Whatever it is that you need to support your organization and making this work out is up to 10% indirect costs. Usually we like to see a lot of detail, but no need to get overly detailed in the indirect costs.
So don't list the toilet paper, Casey. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Saying, please don't tell me you're buying toilet paper. I get it. Everyone needs toilet paper. All right, so next slide.
Cool.
Okay, good.
So that covers, that covers the programmatic side of it, details about the program. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview of some of our processes. Wanted to first start with a webinar that we created, how to apply for a grant. Certainly you'll have support from Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake and subsequently your technical assistance provider, Guyacine Services. But the Trust, we provide resources for applicants just like you. And so this type of stuff is on our website. We encourage you to check it out. And Trust staff is also here to be in a support capacity. So I wanted to describe what happens after you submit your application and describe what we call a technical review committee process. So after you submit, all of the applications go to external reviewers. And external reviewers represent folks that have expertise that are in line with the application package and the grant program goals. So for example, Watershed Assistance, we will get in, we'll recruit reviewers that are engineers and that are experienced with stream restoration and kind of everything that runs the gamut as it relates to meeting the goals of the grant program. And these external reviewers will review up to 6 to 8 proposals each and essentially score based off of the evaluation criteria that is included in the application package or the request for proposals or RFP. And so we're very transparent and clear what your proposal will be reviewed against. And that's what the reviewers ultimately use. And they also list comments in their review and they submit that independently and online. We Trust staff take those scores and that essentially informs how we have a conversation about all of the proposals at a technical review committee meeting. And we find that the technical review committee meeting is really crucial to the process where the experts get to get in a room together or get on the Zoom together and discuss the proposals that were submitted and discuss the pros and the cons, and essentially outcomes of that meeting are funding recommendations from the review committee. So those funding recommendations then go to the Trust's Board of Trustees at one of our quarterly board meetings. This particular grant program will go to our February board meeting, and our board members make the final approval. And in the Trust, we send out decision letters. Those decision letters are sent out via email, and unfortunately, we can't fund every project. We just don't have the funding availability for that. So there are some groups that are declined. If you're declined, we really do encourage you to reach out to us and have a debrief conversation about the summarized reviewers' comments. We really want to set you up for success, whether you go to apply again to that same grant program or if you're interested in other funding opportunities. We find that applicants find this portion of the process extremely helpful to understand where they can enhance their proposal. If folks are awarded, you'll receive a grant agreement that you should read a couple of times, and then you will initial it, sign it, and send it back to the Trust. There may be contingencies to your award. So for example, if you didn't include a piece of information that reviewers asked for, or that reviewers would have liked to see submitted with your application, we will make a contingency to your award and include that in the grant agreement. And then you begin your projects. And of course, us as Trust staff, we're here to support you through the grant management phase. And I think that does it. I don't know, Bonnie, what you have planned for questions at all today. But as we've mentioned earlier, Emily Stransky is the program officer for the Watershed Assistance Grant Program. Her email is here. Certainly send any questions through Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake and Guyacine Services, but Emily is also here to support.
Great. Thanks so much. So next up.
Question though, do you want me to answer your question in the chat really quickly?
No, just save it. Let's let Ashley get through his, and then we'll open it totally up for questions. I just thought that was one that we should answer for everybody. So Ashley Trout is up next.
All right, I'm trying to pull up my screen. Let's see, give me 1 second here.
While we're waiting for Ashley's slides, there's someone by the name of Jerry Stewart on the call. Jerry, I don't know you. We welcome, but if you could send in the chat what congregation or community you're with, that would be really helpful. Or just when we get to questions and answers, if you'll unmute and just let us know where you're from. Ash, oh, there we go. Ashley's getting it.
It's coming.
There we go.
And of course, let's see here.
There
Okay,
you go.
sound good? Looking good? So again, my name is Ashley Trout. I'm with Guyacine Services, and I'm going to be the lead for your technical assistance team. So once you've worked with Bonnie and Matt and Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake and determined that you want to proceed with a grant application, you think you've got a good project, they're going to deliver you to us. And this is the role that we intend to play for you all. We're here to help you understand local environmental challenges, some of the funding streams that are available, which you've now heard in detail about the two specific funding streams that we'll be looking at, and the process for applying for that funding. We're going to come out and conduct site surveys on your property and to help identify green infrastructure opportunities. So green infrastructure, not an abbreviation, but still kind of a strange word for some of you. So in general, just nature-based solutions or any of the other projects that Casey mentioned, like fire retention facilities, rain gardens, even things like, tree planting or removing parts of parking lots and things like that. And then we're actually going to work with you hand in hand to help prepare grant proposals for either the Chesapeake Bay Trust Watershed Assistance Grant or Maryland DNR's Runoff Restoration Initiative, based on your site and what we think as a team is the most effective grant that we want to go for. So again, just to give you a quick understanding of who we are. Again, I'm with Guyacine Services. I'm the prime for this, and I've got two great engineering companies that I've worked with over the years that are going to be working closely with us, developing the more technical aspects of the proposal. Cityscape Engineering and Strawn Environmental, both local firms that have been around for quite a while and have a really strong background in this type of work. I will be your primary contact for all of this. So once we actually have the handoff from IPC, then you can start talking with me directly. There's my contact information, and we'll send that out again later. And then what to expect. So we've got a relatively tight timeline here, right? We're looking at this fall. December 2nd is for the deadline for one of the proposals, and December 15th for the other one. So between now and then, we need to work with you all to have you complete surveys for us. We just want to get a better understanding of your current knowledge around environmental issues and grant writing, where your specific needs are. We want to send out some fact sheets to increase your understanding of a lot of this information. We want to come out and do pretty intense site surveys. That will be done with, I'll be attending each of those. At least one of the engineer teams will be attending, and then we'll be looking for at least 2 representatives from each of your communities or congregations to meet with us for that site survey, so that we're conveying information as effectively as possible and getting as much clear input as possible while we're there. I think as Brianna said, Unfortunately, they can't award funding to every project that is submitted. And likewise, for this particular initiative, we won't be able to put together grant proposals for everyone who is interested. So we're going to have to do some ranking once all the surveys are done and determine which ones we feel have the strongest potential to move forward at this time. That doesn't mean we don't want to work with all of you. We absolutely do. It's just the limits of the current funding that we have and the time that we have is gonna keep us to, I think, putting in roughly 10 proposals in this go round. To help you through this effort, one of the big things that we'll be doing is leading a couple of grant writing workshops. Our team is here to help you with the grant writing, but we are not here to do it entirely for you. There's a number of things that have already been covered as part of the grant writing process that you may not be familiar with, and that's where we're here to help with the technical aspects, with budgeting and things like that. But then there's going to be other components where we really want you to put your best foot forward in telling your story and why you need this project, why you feel it's important, how you intend to maintain it long term, and things like that. So that'll be part of the actual grant preparation, and we will work with you to get everything included and submitted on time for those grants. And I know you're hoping for another 10 or 15 slides, but at this point, I want to keep it really simple. We will work with you much more in depth in the coming weeks. But at this point, I just wanted to give you a quick introduction to what to expect on the technical side going forward. Now, Bonnie, do you want to open up to all of us for questions?
Yeah, I just want to go over one thing. So all of you have received from me the form that will need to be filled out to indicate your interest. And I was trying to pull that up, but I will pull that up in just a second. But so that form, which indicates your interest in participating in this program, needs to be submitted to us by September 15th. Some of you have already sent yours in, so congratulations. I already have a couple of those, so you are already off and running, and you'll be the first ones we hand off to Ashley. But the rest of you, I knew that some of you would need to bring this to your board of trustees or your session or whoever your decision-making body is before you move forward. So I wanted you to have that in hand, just because I know a lot of congregations will, their meetings are, could be the third Thursday of the month or something like that. So I wanted you to make sure that you had that so you could get on the agenda. Filling out that form is not necessarily all of this work that we're talking about doesn't cost you anything except the most valuable thing you have, which is time. So if you're presenting that to your decision-making body and they have questions about, well, what's this going to cost us? It's not going to cost you in terms of money terms, but it does require that people like you are going to shepherd this through the process at your congregation. So it is going to require time. It is not going to require funding. So if those are the questions that your boards or church sessions ask you, I know that's really important. And if you are going to be presenting it to your boards and need approval of any kind and would like me to sit in, the silver lining of COVID is that most of those meetings are being done via Zoom and virtually. So I'm happy if you let me know in advance to sit in on that portion of your board meeting to help explain what it is you're going through. Even though our partners here have done a really great job of explaining everything, I know that this is new to you. So happy to help you to explain this to whoever those decision-making bodies are and present it to them. So I just wanted to make that clear, and I will pop while some of you are asking questions, I'll pop the form up to you. So again, that is due back by September 15th. And then once we have that would be, I'll turn those over to Ashley, and then Ashley and his team would be getting in touch with you as far as setting up site assessments to walk the property and take a look at what the potential projects are. So I just wanted to make that clear to everyone. And so now feel free to unmute yourselves, and we do have the raise your hand feature, I think. Yep, so if you click on the little button on my computer, all the way down, if you scroll down to the bottom, it says reactions. It's a little smiley face. And if you raise, if you hover over that, there'll be a little raise hand function. So if you want to raise your hand, or if you just want to start speaking, that's fine too. But we'll, try to keep everyone from talking over each other, but we'll see what happens. So any questions right off the bat here? Cynthia Taylor has her hand raised. Cynthia, where are you? I saw you a minute ago. Oh, there you are. There you go. Yep.
This is more of a curiosity. A lot of what we thought we would be doing was based on the results of our water audit. Are those kind of out the window now, and we're going to just start with a clean slate, and someone else is going to come in now and take another look? I was just curious about that.
Great question, and I'll let Ashley jump in further. But so some of the congregations that are here today have had a site assessment already done with different partners that IPC works with in your area. So we will definitely rely on some of those recommendations, but in some instances, those were done years ago, and there may be new issues that have developed that the congregation or the community would like to address. And again, those were very specific to your congregational property. In some instances, some of these projects will be larger than just the congregational property. It might incorporate a larger area with a homeowners association. There's the HOA, the homeowners association. So it might be not just a congregational property project. It might be looking more holistically at a whole community. So it might take a bigger assessment to discuss what issues are going. But the Ashley and Blue Water Baltimore, for you, Cynthia, will definitely be looking at those water audit reports as an initial, this is what was recommended. But I think your audit report was done in probably 2015 or 2016.
No, we had a new one.
We had a new one. That's right.
We had
That's
a
right.
new one. 2020.
So yep. We'll take a look at that and then work from there.
Can I just add something, Bonnie?
Yes.
Yes, I just want to add that, when we go through the review process for these proposals, I think including information about, the audits, any type of assessments, watershed assessments or plans, any connection to any type of local plan or assessment, it really helps make the case for the project that this project is specifically identified to address a need that's been documented. So including that in your proposal narrative would be really important.
Yeah, and I would just add, and we'll certainly go into more detail about this, but so for example, Cynthia, if Mount Olive has been working with IPC since 2014, say, that we're definitely going to talk about that. That's 6 years of commitment towards this cause. And we'll talk about how that relationship has evolved and why you continue to work with them. And yeah, I think that helps make a good case.
I have another question, but I'll let someone else go on. I'll come back.
Go ahead. Oh, wait, yep. Oh, yep. Father Meadows. Hello.
Hi, Bonnie and the gang.
Hi.
I have a question. If we've already done the audit and the information we received from Baltimore, can we move into the design phase with like neighborhood design, or do you have, as he was saying, do you have your own engineers and designers? Do we go ahead into that and try to pull that in as part of our original proposal, or do we need to wait what you're expressing?
So I'll jump in first, but then Ashley, I think this one is for you. So I think the folks that came from Blue Water Baltimore did kind of a concept plan of these are the things that we would recommend. And I know, you keep moving around on my screen. Father Meadows, I know that we've done one proposal before that did not get funded. So I think looking with fresh eyes and with the specific requirements of this grant opportunity, we might be able to tease some things out that we might have missed before, and take a broader look at some things to try to make this work for you. But I don't know that Ashley nor this current team has been out there, so I'm sure that they would want to take a look.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if I fully understood your question, but I mean, our job is to secure the funding to do 100% design, formal designs for the project. So we will go into some level of concept design for the grant application, but even if a water audit's already been done, it doesn't mean through this project we don't have the funding to actually go into any kind of in-depth design at this point.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? Cynthia, go ahead and ask your second question.
I was just curious in noticing that Ashley's slide showed community-based organization capacity building initiative. We're on a property with 2 rental properties that belong to the church. There's also behind us a large 3 quite large buildings of a co-op for seniors, and that was land that was sold to that builder to build that, and they're downhill from us. And so should we be thinking about if we're going to do a project, connecting with them and seeing if that, because it's almost like the land is together, but it's not, but it's all together really. It used to be all the church's land. So and you know, you ask questions about land ownership, which of course we no longer own that, but would it be prudent for us to extend an approach to them that says we're going in for this on this property? We want to invite you to be a part of this because we're all in the, you know, adjacent land.
Absolutely. And that's why, going back to your first question, so when we did the original water audit, we really were just looking at the church property. But if there is a larger issue and some of your runoff is going down to these other properties, that is definitely something that we would want to take a holistic view of. And then there would be time, I would think that when we did the site assessment, we would want to have permission from those other landowners to come and walk the property and take a look. And then those would be, even though possibly Mount Olive might be the applicant for this grant opportunity, then going back to the letters, the permission letters that I think both Brianna and Nicole might have mentioned, then you would need to have letters from those other owners saying that they are partnering and part of the whole project. And my other partners check in. Feel free to jump in and say if I said that right.
Yeah, I can add for the resiliency funding. For construction projects, we require the landowner agreement. For design projects, a landowner may not be willing to sign a full agreement because they don't really know what the design is going to be yet. And so in that case, we require the basically an access agreement that basically states that the partners all have access to the site to get on site to do any type of surveys or any work that's needed, and that there's an understanding that if the project, you know, once the project is permitted and all the partners are in agreement, that it would move forward for implementation.
And I'm going to go ahead and ask my one last question, and I promise this is the last one. We have a cemetery, quite a large cemetery. How does that figure into any of this at all?
It certainly can. Can you remind me where Mount Olive is?
It's Old Court Road, Randallstown, Maryland. If you know where Northwest Hospital is, we're on the opposite side of Liberty Road.
Okay. Just trying to think if you're getting assessed any kind of impervious surface fee for your.
I believe we are, based on what a prior finance person said to me, but I have not seen it.
Okay. So,
And the cemetery actually does not have, Pastor, there are no paved surfaces in the cemetery. Aren't they all dirt and rocks and?
There's a gravel road that.
Right.
runs through one section.
yeah, well, there's certainly, we're always willing to look at any and all opportunities.
Okay.
If we can add green space, more robust green space to that cemetery, if we can make surfaces more pervious, increase the ability to absorb water, add wildlife habitat, anything like that, we're certainly open to looking at that.
That would make the deer happy.
Well, one of the great things that I'm often baffled by the church cemeteries that I visit, in that it seems like they'd be great opportunities for tree plantings, if not within the cemetery itself, but at least on a peripheral type of planting, as long as we can figure out how to water the trees at the beginning. I just feel like anyone who's buried wants to be buried under a tree. It's just nicer for, to think about it, and for the people who will come and visit you, that there'd be some trees there. So there's certainly usually opportunity, at least for peripheral tree plantings around cemeteries as well. Any other questions? Pastor Harriet.
Yes, good afternoon, good evening. I have a question. Our congregation, well, the sanctuary is kind of on a hill, and water runs down towards a state-owned park less than 2 miles away. So all of our neighbors are affected by the water which runs downhill, but it all ends up at Rock State Park. Will we have to enter in some agreement with the state, given that the water more than likely ends up in that Rock State Park? And there are streams and there's waterfalls in the park and all of those other wonderful things.
So would you have to enter into an agreement with the
Is the
state?
state, are they considered a partner? Do we have to, your access agreements and those kinds of things? Should we think about those kinds of things?
So part of the design and permitting process, the plan reviewers are looking at how we're affecting the change in runoff patterns. Anything that you do, anything that we're proposing to do should be beneficial to anyone downstream of your site. Also, as part of the planning and permitting process, we are going to be required to, as part of actual design, reach out to any of your immediate neighbors to let them know about the project, and sort of just public notice. And that's just good practice as well, right? I would think that your state neighbors would be delighted that you are reducing runoff onto their property. So it shouldn't be a problem. And among this group, we have a number of state contacts to help secure that communication.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? No other questions. So Casey or Brianna, you can address the question that I put in the chat, just so that they know if that's a acceptable charge.
It is an acceptable request. As I said, there is a lot of federal funding in the Watershed Assistance Grant Program that traditionally does not support food. But that's the beauty of having a funding partnership. The trust's dollars can support food. And so as long as you make a kind of a clear justification for the food request and why it's needed, for charrettes, as I think was the example that that Bonnie gave, that's something we've supported before, and the trust would either support the proposal, or we would put some of our funding towards it with other funds, right? So that's usually what we do in those scenarios. If, for instance, you're requesting $75,000 or $100,000 and 50,000 of it is food, we might look at that very critically and reduce it. But yeah, that's a acceptable request line within a proposal.
Thank you.
We can't buy a crab franchise.
I would say the flip side of that, though, would be, if you all, can cover the costs of food, that can be put towards match, and we want to, I encourage you all to think long and hard about where you can find match for the grant proposal, because that will be important. It's not required, but and Casey, Brianna, Nicole, correct me if I'm wrong, it definitely helps if you bring match to the table for this. So things that you might already provide for meetings like food and drink, we can show that as match. Your time coming to those meetings, we can show that as match.
That's a really good point that Ashley just made. I don't want to talk over anyone, but I did just want to say that oftentimes too, the reason why we emphasize getting bids for design services is because it can surprise you how expensive that is. And, while it sounds like a lot of money that we're making available, sometimes the bids can come back and surprise you. You need to spend the bulk of the request on the contractor. And so, anyway.
Yeah, thank you. And I don't know if everyone understands what match is, so I'm going to back up a little bit and just explain. So, for every dollar that you're requesting, if you can show something of value that your organization is putting towards this effort, you're matching the dollars with something that is valued. So I think so for like a volunteer hour, for just a standard volunteer, I think each hour is worth something like $21 or $22.
For us, I don't know, actually, Nicole, how you deal with it, is we track volunteer hours. There's an actual field in our system that allows you to show volunteer hours. We don't want you to try and quantify volunteer hours in your budget though, only because some people would argue that a volunteer hour is worth $100 an hour, and some would argue that it was worth $10 an hour. And so we really just track quantity of volunteer hours anticipated and not quantify that. But Ashley's example of your time, that should be quantified. Your time is quantifiable, and that is something that you should absolutely show as an in-kind donation. We don't want to just know the number of hours, but we want you to actually estimate your pay rate, what you would have been paid, and you can show that as an in-kind donation, and that can really add up. And you shouldn't shortchange the amount of time you're going to spend selecting and managing contractors, reporting on the grant. That time adds up very quickly.
Yeah, we're trying to do a better job of tracking that in order to make the case that, this is really how much these projects cost, because a lot of the state funding for the resiliency projects is really supposed to be put to, the contractual line item is prioritized basically. And we're trying to make the case for, we need these other line items as well. So we can fund some personnel time, travel time, etc., to get to project sites. We don't fund food on the state grants, but we also have other funding sources. Like Casey said, we have other funding sources in-house that we can go to for that. So if that's something that you want to include, it probably won't be awarded to you, but then I can do my best to still be able to purchase whatever items you need myself and bring them over to the community meeting through another funding source.
Great, thank you.
That's cool that you. I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Pastor Dell had her hand raised. I don't see her, but it did indicate to me that you had a question. So Pastor Dell, can you chime in? You still there?
Yeah,
There you go. I hear you.
all right. My question is, prior, COVID put a big hurt on community involvement and in the project that I got originally. And I'm questioning, what are we looking for when we say community involvement? I can get all kinds of buy-ins, but then to actually have people show up might be something else. And what are we looking at right now? Folk are very scared to come out and be in gathered community. So any help on that?
I can respond to that really briefly. First, I want to say that there isn't a requirement that you do community engagement work in your proposal. If you're doing a design on your property and your property is not having a lot of foot traffic, would not need the buy-in of community members, then it would simply be the folks that are regularly on site, right, at on your property. Now, if your property is a house of worship or a building where there is a lot of folks coming through, we do think it can be valuable to engage folks in building that buy-in on the front end, but we're very open to what that looks like. And for us, Brianna can speak to this even more. She manages several programs that do a lot of engagement work. It's, the type of engagement work has changed dramatically this past year. There's a lot more, meetings like this that are happening, where we're building buy-in, sharing information, and gaining feedback from folks through Zoom meetings. And I have to tell you, I think there's been a lot of silver linings to that. Even this meeting is an example, I think, of a more convenient and accessible way to attend a discussion like this from your home, hopefully, and less travel time. So we've seen some folks get like more participation and more buy-in because of the convenience factor. But that's not for everyone. Some folks, technology is a barrier. And so, you do have to think about your audience and what's the best way to engage them. And you may have to do different forms of engagement depending on your audience's makeup. But we're very open to supporting those as needed on the front end of the design process.
Yeah, and for the resiliency funding, because we're trying to fund projects that provide that community-wide benefit, we usually require at least one community meeting. But like Casey said, that could be in the form of a virtual meeting. For some of our projects, we've had outside meetings or a combination of, just depending on the community and what they're comfortable with. And we'd be very willing to work with you on what that would look like for your community.
And I'll just jump in here. I think there's two different things happening here. So we do have this initial stage where we're applying for the grant. And so that's different than when you're going through the design process. So in this initial stage of just getting approval to apply for a grant, you might only need the buy-in and to do community engagement within the decision-making folks at your congregation, just to say, hey, we want to do this, right? And then when you get the wonderful email in February that you've been awarded and you read the whole letter, and now we're off and running for the next 8 months to work on what your design is going to actually be. That's going to be where we're going to look for more community engagement and involvement in that process. And God, we should be through all of this by then. We would hope that we will have been done with the variants, and 2022 will look so much better than 2021 has. So let's all pray for that. So that we will all be able to get together in person to look at what the wonderful designs that Ashley and his team, or whoever the design companies and construction companies are working on their proposals, that you'll be able to run those by your congregants and members and community, doing community engagement in person in 2022. Let's all pray for that. So. Any other questions? There are still a couple people that I don't know. We have some folks on the phone that I don't know who you are. And then Jerry Stewart. I do want to respect your time. We said this would run from 5 to 6:30. So I want you to feel free to log off when this recording is available. I'm going to share it with you. We did have some folks that could not come tonight, so they will be getting this too. I do want to also say, and just the whole silver lining, we have congregations here from Harford County, Baltimore County, Baltimore City, Anne Arundel County. You've come from all over our region here. And so thank you for joining us tonight. And you know how to find me. I know how to find you. We're here to answer your questions. But if you want to stick around and have other questions, feel free to do so. I'm happy to hang out. But if you need to go, feel free to do that. And then I will resend the form. If you've lost the form in your emails, you'll get the form to get completed and send to us to get this process started. So, but if you're Jerry or was called on the phone and I don't know who you are, please let me know. You can either send a chat or just hang out and let me know who you were. Thanks, Nicole. Really appreciate it. Bye, Nicole. Bye, Casey.
Oh, I can stay. I was waving.
Oh, you can stay. I thought you were waving to Nicole. I get it. It's hard to tell.
Yep. There. Should have mastered that by now, a year into this.
Great. Anyone else have questions? Good night, Carrie. Bye. Thanks for coming. Thanks, Tarun. Bye, Brianna.
Bye now.
Bye, Father Matters. Bye, Cynthia. Great to see you. So wanting Patience and Pat, did you have any questions about empowering believers? Oh, Pat, you're muted. I don't think I can.
Okay.
Oh, there you go.
Stewart, he's from Empowering Believers Church also.
Oh, he is. Okay, great. Thank you very much.
He's not, what happened, he didn't respond, but he's from Empowering Believers also.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much. See you.
I don't have any questions, but thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Let me see if that. All right. So the person who was on the phone hung up. They will remain a mystery person. I don't know who it was.
Bonnie, thank you so much. Ashley, thank you so much.
Thank you, Casey.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
We
Grateful
know
for the
if,
opportunity.
we know if the other connector group is organizing a similar event like this.
Yeah, I know that they had one scheduled for, I think actually when like most of our team was out of town, so it had already happened. But I can facilitate a connection if that would be helpful. Ashley, I know that you maybe have their connection, but are there contact information? But if it's helpful, I can.
I think I do. I just didn't know if
Okay.
you all had sat in on something that I had missed or.
No.
Let's definitely like tee that up via email between them and see if there's they intend to do anything else.
Yeah.
similar.
Okay.
Yeah. Bonnie, great job with this. I thought it was really I thought it was
Thank
really
you.
helpful. I hope the other folks did.
Yeah.
So let me just, I want to get clarity. So, because Ashley, you said we would be doing 10 applications. So you're doing 10 with us and 10 with them, right? So it's a total
Oh
of
no,
20.
10 total. Gosh, I hope it's 10 total.
Is it 10 total, guys? Do you know?
I think our contract says a minimum of 10.
Yeah,
That
I don't,
sounds right. But I'm gonna relook at it.
I thought it was 10 WAGPs and 10 RRIs.
That's for number
Well-
of groups that will be engaging up front.
that sounds right to me. I don't have the contract up, and so I'm happy to, Bree, I don't know if you're trying to find it right now.
Yeah, let me look at it.
As y'all know, we have,
Well, this is really funny because I don't even know from Matt, because I meant to ask him on our last meeting. Do we have a contract yet?
okay, so just for the record, I'm really glad this came up right now. So
Yeah.
while we're
Oh, you know
talking-
what? I'm going to stop recording. Hold on a second, because we don't
Yeah,
need
let's-
this recorded.
Yes, please.